Welcome back to the deep dive. We are getting into something pretty hitting today. We're tackling the, well, often stressful world of professional mold inspection and testing. If you've ever spotted a weird stain or smelled that kind of earthy odor, you know that feeling, that little bit of panic.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we dove into a really comprehensive guide on environmental assessments. Our mission today, basically give you the blueprint. We want to demystify the whole process, look at the specialized tech they use, the stuff that finds hidden moisture,
Right.
and explain the differences between the testing levels, the main ones anyway, and break down what it all costs. Because it's not just about looks.
Not at all.
Professional mold assessment is way more complex than just seeing if something looks like black and fuzzy. It's really a data game. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with how these pros find water damage that maybe you couldn't see for months.
Yeah, and that's the crucial first step, really. Homeowners often only call when, they see a problem, but by then,
Yeah.
the issue's usually pretty advanced.
Right, it's already established itself.
Exactly. The real danger is that undetected moisture. It's been quietly brewing, making a perfect home for mold, and maybe even causing deeper structural issues, decay. So a proper assessment, a proactive one, has to find the source, not just the symptom you can see.
Okay, so the real detective work. Tracking down hidden moisture. The guide called this the moisture and water intrusion assessment. And they're not just like poking around, they bring serious gear, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the two probably most important tools are digital moisture meters.
Mm.
They measure the actual moisture content in materials like wood or drywall.
Uh-huh.
A thermal camera.
Ah, the thermal cameras, those are cool ones.
They really are
Yeah.
using infrared imaging. It's incredible. It lets inspectors see temperature differences, those anomalies caused by evaporation or, pooling water behind walls, without actually tearing anything open.
It's amazing. I mean, just think, maybe a couple of decades ago, inspectors were probably drilling holes everywhere trying to find leaks.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of exploratory demolition. This tech saves so much time, so much drywall.
And mess.
And mess, yeah. It's non-destructive, and it lets them be really systematic. They don't just check the obvious spot where you saw something. The inspection covers all the usual suspects: roofs, windows, plumbing systems, basements, crawl spaces.
The damn places.
The damn places, exactly. But also, critically, they look outside, like the grading and drainage around the house foundation. And they look really closely at HVAC-related condensation, because faulty heating and cooling systems, notorious sources for hidden leaks inside.
That makes sense. So once they've hopefully tracked down the water source, they shift focus to the air itself.
That's often the next step, yeah.
Which brings us to indoor air quality testing, IAQ. What does that actually capture? Is it just mold spores floating around?
No, IAQ is actually much broader than just mold. When they test the air, they're looking for things like volatile organic compounds, VOCs, also general allergens and mold spores, of course. And they check humidity levels, too, which is really important.
So it's a wider environmental picture.
It is. This kind of comprehensive testing is often recommended if people living there have complaints, headaches, breathing issues, things that seem tied to being indoors. Or, and this is vital, it's used after a mold cleanup, post-remediation, to make sure the job was done right.
Okay, that distinction helps, knowing the scope. So now we know what they're looking for. Moisture sources, stuff in the air. We need to talk about how they collect the actual data, the samples, and inevitably the price tag. Let's dive into what these samples cost. Per sample, basically. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Right. So the standard sampling methods, the pricing is pretty consistent based on the guide. Air samples and surface samples generally run about $125 per sample.
$125 a pop. Okay, let's break down those surface samples first. If you actually see something growing, what are the ways they can collect that?
If you've got visible growth, there are three main types. The standard swab is like the go-to, recommended for collecting right from the fuzzy stuff you see.
Just swab it directly.
Exactly. Then there's the tape lift method. That one's great because it's non-destructive. They just press a special clear adhesive onto a surface they're suspicious about. Think like expensive wallpaper or finished wood where you don't want to scrape.
Gotcha. Less invasive.
Much less. And finally, there's bulk sampling. That's when they actually need to collect a piece of the material itself, like a chunk of drywall or some insulation, to see how deep the mold growth, the contamination, actually goes.
Okay, that makes sense. So swab for the obvious fuzzy spots, tape lift for a quick, careful check on, say, nice surfaces, and bulk when they need to physically take a piece of the building material.
Got it.
All right. Now let's talk air samples, the standard ones. Because this is where that comparison thing becomes really important, isn't it? Most people might think, oh, just take one air sample inside where I smell it. But professional testing needs more than that. Explain that baseline idea.
Yeah, you absolutely have to establish context for indoor air. It's critical.
Yeah.
So they'll collect typically 2 indoor air samples from the area or areas of concern. But, and this is the key, they must compare that to the outside air. So they take one outdoor air sample, usually near the building, maybe near an air intake. That outdoor sample acts as the reference point, the baseline.
The normal background level.
Exactly. It shows what mold levels are just normally floating around in your specific environment on that particular day.
So you're not just finding out if mold is present inside because, let's face it, mold spores are everywhere, right?
Everywhere, yeah.
You're finding out if the spore levels inside are significantly higher or maybe different types compared to what's naturally outside. That comparison is what really flags a problem.
Precisely. Without that baseline comparison, the indoor numbers, they don't tell you nearly as much. The data is almost meaningless in isolation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's super important context. Now let's shift gears to the high-end option, the high-tech one. We jump from that $125 standard sample up to something called ERMI testing. With the guide lists at $440. That's a big jump.
It is.
It says DNA-based. What's the key difference here? What justifies that higher price?
So ERMI stands for Environmental Relative Moldiness Index. And yeah, it's a DNA-based test. They usually do it on dust samples collected from the home. Instead of just counting spores like in an air sample, ERMI identifies the actual species of mold present using their DNA. And it determines the relative amount of each species.
Species specific, okay.
Yeah, and what's really interesting and useful is how the ERMI method works. It categorizes 36 different mold species into 2 groups. Group 1 species are the ones strongly associated with water damage in buildings, the ones potentially more likely to cause health issues. And Group 2 species are more common molds, often found outdoors or not typically linked to water intrusion problems.
So it weights the results based on the type of mold, not just the quantity.
Exactly. The final ERMI score gives you this calculated index, a snapshot really, of the potential health risk, specifically tied to those water damage indicator molds in that environment.
Wow. Okay, that level of detail is a massive leap from just a basic spore count. I can definitely see why the sources say this test often comes up when someone's health issues
Yeah,
seem really strongly linked to their home environment. Maybe a doctor suggests it, that kind of thing.
that's a very common scenario, yes.
Yeah.
When you need that deeper diagnostic dive into the types of mold.
That's a powerful tool, especially for those tough chronic illness investigations. Talk about the aftermath, the cleanup. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where things like legal liability and, frankly, protecting your investment really come in, right?
Absolutely. This is critical. The documentation you get from professional testing and inspection, these reports, they are designed to be legally admissible. Think landlord-tenant disputes, or trying to sell a property with a history of mold, or very commonly dealing with insurance claims.
You need proof.
You need clear, objective proof. And good reports provide detailed findings, lab results, but also, importantly, easy-to-read summaries. So you don't need to be a microbiologist to understand or present the key findings.
Right. So, okay, the remediation company comes in, they do the cleanup, maybe tear out some drywall, fix the leak. How do you know they actually got it all, that the problem is solved? This brings us to that final step, post-remediation verification, or PRV.
The PRV, yes.
Now, if I'm already shelling out potentially thousands for the cleanup crew, why do I need to spend another $375, according to the guide, for this PRV? Can't the remediation company just, sign off on their own work, save me some money?
That's a really common question. And the answer is all about independence and avoiding conflicts of interest. It's about liability. The PRV is considered non-negotiable by, well, industry best practices because it absolutely must be performed by an independent third-party inspector, someone totally separate from the cleanup crew.
Okay. So the guys who did the cleanup can't check their own homework, basically.
It's exactly right. Think about it. It's a massive conflict of interest if they verify their own success. What incentive do they have to find remaining problems? The purpose of the PRV is really twofold. First, confirm that the physical cleanup, the remediation, was effective, the mold is gone. And second, just as important, verify that the underlying cause of the mold, that moisture source we talked about earlier, was actually fixed properly.
So it doesn't just come right back.
Precisely. Without that independent sign-off, that third-party validation, you really have no objective proof if the mold reappears a few months down the line.
Okay, so that 375 PRV is basically like liability insurance, performed by a neutral referee.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
What does that final check actually involve? What kind of testing do they do for the PRV?
It's typically a focused retesting of the area that was remediated. The guide indicates a standard PRV often includes 2 air samples within the contained or cleaned area and 1 surface sample, maybe a swab, of a previously affected surface
To confirm it's clean now.
to confirm it's clean now, using objective lab data. This final report is the confirmation. It's often required documentation if you're selling the property, maybe refinancing, or needed to formally close out an insurance claim related to the mold damage.
It gives everyone involved that necessary validation, confidence that the job is truly done.
Exactly. Peace of mind, backed by data.
So quite a journey. We've gone from, finding hidden water with thermal cameras all the way through DNA analysis and landing on the critical importance of legal documentation and verification. Okay, so what does this all mean for you listening?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that professional mold assessment isn't just one thing. It's a multi-layered process. It requires specific tools, specific testing methods, and you really need to understand what level of testing you need for your situation. The goal is always moving from just suspicion or assumption to verified data.
Yeah, we learned that the first step, the assessment, leans heavily on those advanced tools like thermal cameras to find the source. And that testing isn't just testing, it requires establishing that crucial outdoor baseline for comparison.
Right.
Whether you end up needing standard air samples at $125 or maybe that super detailed ERMI test for $440, if health is a major concern, you're paying for reliable, actionable information.
And crucially, don't forget the end game. Verification is key. Understanding these different service types, the initial assessment, the various testing options, and that independent post-remediation verification, the PRV, it really ensures you're well informed. Whether you're, say, dealing with a tricky landlord situation, buying a home, or maybe just curious about the health of your own house, it means you know what standard to expect and demand for a truly clean result.
That's powerful knowledge to have in your back pocket, definitely. All right, now for one final thought, something for you to maybe chew on. If ERMI testing using DNA already gives us such a detailed, species-specific picture of the mold situation and its potential severity, how might integrating that kind of advanced DNA sequencing become maybe standard practice, like for routine annual home maintenance checks in the future?
Interesting.
Could your next standard home inspection actually involve mandatory DNA dust or air sampling? Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.